All right, so today's deep dive is a listener request you wanted, the Spain News Roundup. Well, buckle up because we're covering a lot. We're talking Spaniards fleeing a war zone, a housing crisis, and even a court case that's reopening old wounds.
Yeah, it's a lot to process. Really shows you the range of what's going on in Spain right now.
Let's jump right into it with this first story from RTVE. They're the main public broadcaster in Spain, and they're reporting on this massive evacuation effort happening right now. Hundreds of Spaniards being airlifted out of Lebanon.
It's one of those things that makes you stop and think. Here we are just going about our day, but international relations, geopolitics, it has a real human impact. Imagine being stuck in a conflict zone, thousands of miles from home.
And having to make that impossible choice, do you stay and risk everything or leave behind everything you know? RTVE's actually interviewed one of the evacuees who just landed back in Madrid, and their words really hit me. They said, it's very hard to leave everyone you love and close your door.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in the geopolitical stuff,
Yeah.
but this is what it boils down to. Families, individuals, lives totally upended. And it speaks to that fundamental role of a country, right, to get its citizens out of harm's way.
Absolutely. And we're talking big numbers here, something like 500 people evacuated so far on 2 military aircraft. From a logistical standpoint, how do they even begin to coordinate something like that in a crisis?
It's a testament to preparedness. Countries like Spain, they have these protocols in place, as rare as these situations thankfully are. But it's not just about logistics, right? There's a whole diplomatic dance happening behind the scenes, working with Lebanon, coordinating with other countries.
Because it's not just about getting your people out, it's about trying to de-escalate the situation as a whole. So where do things go from here?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Spain has said they're ready to send a third aircraft if they need to. But there are still many Spaniards who chose to stay or maybe couldn't get out on those first flights.
So it's a waiting game, really. And a reminder that things can change so quickly on the world stage. So while we're watching that situation unfold, back in Spain, there's another issue that's hitting a lot closer to home for many people, literally, and that's housing. Or, well, the lack of affordable housing, especially for young people.
It's a huge problem, and it's only getting worse. RTVE has been covering this a lot, and it's become a really hot political topic. In fact, the opposition leader, Alberto Núñez Feijóo, has been hammering the current government over their housing policies.
Feijóo, right. He's the head of the People's Party, the main opposition party. And he's calling the government's handling of the housing crisis a failure.
Well, he's the opposition leader, so you kind of expect that, right?
Yeah.
Housing affordability, or the lack of it, is something that affects so many people, especially younger generations. It's a really good way to get people fired up and connect with voters.
Right, it's relatable, but what's he actually proposing? RTVE outlined his party's new plan, and it seems like a lot of the same old stuff we've heard before. Cut the red tape, build more homes, maybe throw in some financial assistance.
Yeah, on paper it all sounds good, doesn't it? I mean, streamlining the process of buying a home, that could definitely remove some obstacles. And increasing the housing supply, that should, in theory, help to bring prices down. And then offering some help with down payments, well, nobody's going to complain about that.
Exactly. But the skeptic in me wonders, how are they going to pay for all of this? Are these just empty promises, or is there some real substance behind them?
Well, that's what we need to look at more closely. Increasing the housing supply, that's not a quick fix. Right. That takes time, resources, and there are always bureaucratic hurdles, even with the best of intentions. And then there's a financial side of things. If they're going to offer financial assistance, will that mean raising taxes, cutting other programs? These are the details that voters are going to want to know about.
That's where the rubber meets the road, right? Because one thing RTVE highlighted was Feijóo really trying to appeal to younger voters. He said, it is the youth of today who will build and defend the democracy of tomorrow. That's a pretty powerful statement.
It is. He's really tapping into that anxiety that so many young people are feeling about their future. Will they be able to afford to live the same kind of lives their parents did? Will they ever be able to buy a home? It remains to be seen whether Feijóo's plan will actually address these concerns, but it definitely highlights how important young voters are becoming in Spanish politics.
It's true. These big issues like housing, they really make you think about the future, don't they? But speaking of the future, our next story takes us back into Spain's past with a court case that's stirring up a lot of emotion and controversy.
Yeah, this one is really about more than just a single case. It touches on some fundamental questions about justice, about how a country deals with its history, especially when it comes to something as painful as terrorism.
We're talking about the ETA, the Basque separatist group. RTVE is covering a court ruling that's related to the 1997 murder of Miguel Angel Blanco, a politician who was targeted by ETA. It was a horrific act of terrorism that really shook Spain to its core.
Absolutely. Even decades later, the memory of that event, it still casts a long shadow. It was a turning point.
Yeah.
It led to those massive protests, really galvanized public opinion against ETA. So this case, it carries a lot of weight.
And now RTVE is reporting that the National Court has ruled that the statute of limitations has expired in the case against two former ETA leaders. These are Miguel Albizuir Arte and Ignacio de Gracia Regui. Basically, because of this ruling, they can't be prosecuted for their alleged roles in the murder.
And this is where things get really complicated. The court based its decision on a previous ruling that was related to another ETA leader, Soledad Parguer. And it all goes back to something called the Parrot Doctrine. Are you familiar with that?
Vaguely, but yeah, a little refresher would be helpful.
Okay, so basically the Parrot Doctrine was this legal mechanism that Spain used to extend prison sentences, particularly for terrorists. It changed how sentence reductions were calculated, meaning that people who were convicted of very serious crimes would end up serving much longer terms.
Okay, so how does that tie into this case with ETA?
Well, in 2013, the European Court of Human Rights, they ruled that the Parrot Doctrine, it violated the right to liberty because it was being applied retroactively. And that meant that some of these convicted terrorists, they were ending up serving longer sentences than what they were originally supposed to.
So because of that 2013 ruling, these two individuals in the Miguel Angel Blanco case, they're off the hook.
Exactly. It's a legal technicality, but it has huge implications. I mean, on the one hand, you have the principle of not applying laws retroactively, right? Which is a really important part of a fair justice system. But then on the other hand, you have the families of the victims and probably a lot of the public who feel like justice hasn't been served.
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation, especially with something as sensitive and painful as this event in Spain's history.
Absolutely. And it just goes to show that sometimes the legal process can't provide that sense of closure, that satisfaction that people are looking for. It forces us to really grapple with these difficult questions, like what does justice really mean? And is it ever truly possible to achieve in cases like this?
It's a lot to think about. We've covered a lot of ground today, from international crises to political battles, even these echoes of Spain's past. And I think it highlights that Spain, like a lot of countries, is facing a complex present and an uncertain future.
Definitely. But as we've seen today, by staying informed, by engaging with these issues, we can better understand the challenges, the opportunities that are ahead. And not just in a place like Spain, but in our own countries as well.
It's a good reminder that we're all connected in a lot of ways, and the choices that individuals make, that governments make, even that courts make, they have ripple effects that go way beyond the headlines. So stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions.